Alireza, thank you for taking time to talk with us. There is a really horrible situation that's unfolding in Iran right now involving a young woman who was wearing a hijab, and somehow she ended up dead. Explain to me and to our audience exactly what happened there.
Well, what happened just a few days ago was really the story of almost every day of Iran in the past 43 years. A young woman with no political activism or anything. She was actually properly covered, but she was picked up by what they call the morality police. That is really a tool by the state security forces, by the Revolutionary Guards, to suppress the population and exert their misogynist views on the population. And after she was picked up, within 2 hours, she ended up in the hospital in coma. In between her arrest and ending up in the hospital, according to witnesses and all the other indications, she was badly beaten and tortured in the police van and also at the detention with severe blows to her brain. That she basically became, brain dead, and within 3 days she died.
What do we know about this young woman? Where is she from? And what do we know about her background?
She was a young 22-year-old girl in the city of Saqqez, which is a relatively small town in the Kurdistan province in the western part of Iran. And she had a lot of ambitions, hopes for the future. She was very active in arts and, like many other Iranian women, she came with her brother to Tehran for just a visit. And she got off the metro. She was picked up by the so-called morality police. And then, within 2 hours, she went to coma and dead. But what you saw really as a result of her death is really the story of today's Iran.
Her name was Mahsa Amini, Mahsa Amini, and it's my understanding, as you said, that she was wearing her hijab, wearing it properly, and somehow she ends up dead, and that is just so tragic. And I want to make sure the family knows just how sorry we are about this, and every other woman and every other man, child in Iran that goes through this kind of thing. And of course yourself as well, because we've known you for many years, how sorry we are that this happens and has happened. But why does this keep happening? Alireza.
JJ, Mahsa Amini, it was like her innocence, her sincerity that touched everybody in the country, not just Iran. And before you knew it, it was all over the world. And she somehow, with her death, told the story of the Iranian women, Iranian girls, and the Iranian population as a whole. The fact that her death sparked tremendous outrage all around the country. And she became, from an unknown girl to perhaps the most tweeted hashtag with her name, over 100 million hashtags used by that, is tremendous. And that's why I think it basically triggered the outburst of expressions of protests all over the country. Why? Because Iran was like a powder keg. There was so much anger, so much vented, with so much dissatisfaction among the population, that her death basically triggered all of that. And it wasn't just in her hometown or home state. It spread to all the 31 provinces of Iran. It wasn't, she was, her background is Kurdish, but it didn't matter. You had young girls, older women, young men, old men, people in different, all over the country who related to her and her story. And they took to the streets because they said, this is the end of it. Enough is enough. It showed to the whole world, and particularly the people of Iran, that there is no solution for the misery of the Iranian people except ending the rule of the clerics. And that's what we see now all over the country. The protests have spread to 156 cities in all 31 provinces. As of today, which is the 12th day of the protests, over 240 people have been killed, 12,000 have been arrested, and the protest is still ongoing. Despite all the killings, all the repression, the regime has not managed to end the protests.
So what then will it take to stop this regime, to stop this kind of behavior, stop this kind of activity? I know this is something you and your organization and many others, let's just be frank about it, have been after and trying to work on for decades. But this regime is still there. The Ayatollah is still there. What will it take to end this regime?
Well, keep in mind that the regime ruling Iran is the most barbaric phenomena we have ever seen in our history, and perhaps in the history of the world. They use religion as a tool to maintain power. They rule by killing and eliminating their opponents. They're not Muslims. They use Islamic extremism as a cover for their repression. And I think the fact that over the past 43 years, a very high price has already been paid. Now is the time. What happened in the past 10 days, it wasn't a spontaneous thing that just happened now. This is the continuation of 43 years of struggle against this regime. Just in the summer of 1988, 30,000 political prisoners were massacred in the Iranian prisons based on a fatwa or religious decree issued by then Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khomeini against the main Iranian opposition movement, who are Muslims themselves, the opposition, the MEK, saying that anyone who remains steadfast and believes in this organization needs to be executed. And they brought every single prisoner before a panel of 4 people. One of them was Ebrahim Raisi, the current president of the Iran regime. And within 2 months, they massacred 30,000 political prisoners. The vast majority of them belong to this movement. And all throughout these years, so many members of the opposition have been killed. They fought this regime. They created a culture in these opposition members created a culture of saying no to the Ayatollahs, a culture of resistance, a culture of keeping your beliefs and ideas and paying the price and not submitting to the tyranny and the dictatorship. And that's why when Mahsa Amini is killed, that culture, that tradition comes to life again, and people pour into the streets and they demand change. So what does it take to end all of that? The only way really left is the overthrow of this regime, not the Iraqi style, not by external force, rather by the will of the people of Iran, as you can witness it all over the country. The good thing is that there is organized opposition on the ground. There is what they call resistance units. These are young people. Many of them are actually female. And you have seen perhaps the video clips in the social media that how women are the ones who are in the forefront. They are daring to stand up against the repressive guards, and they confront them, push them back. And they feel this is the moment for them. And I also think this is the moment for the rest of the world to stand on the side of the people of Iran. And all they really need to do is to recognize the right of the people of Iran to unseat the repressive rulers. That's all they need to do, defending them, standing on their side, depriving the enemy, depriving the Iran regime of the resources they need to suppress the population, condemning every action the regime does, and supporting the people's right to overthrow the Ayatollahs.
Okay, that's a great concept. That is great in theory, but how now can you keep this momentum going?
Well, first of all, it's amazing that the momentum has been kept so far this long. There were several rounds of nationwide protests starting in late 2017, early 2018, and then in November 2019, and then again in January 2020. And each of those protests, the regime brought brute force into the scene, killing so many people. And within 2 or 3 days, they managed to, to put down the revolt until the next round. This time, this is the 12th day, and they haven't been able to do it. Second, what you see now, which is different, is the intensity of the protests in the country. The people are more confrontational than they have ever been. You see the very young generation involved. This is the generation that have seen nothing but the Ayatollahs. The millennials, the Z generation, they are the ones who are in the streets. All sectors of society are involved. And so that's why we need to really galvanize the international community behind them. We need to support those who are on the ground fighting the Ayatollahs, fighting the regime, and be their voice. And eventually, JJ, there is no dictatorship in the world that has ruled forever. There is a timeline for them. And I think the time for the Ayatollahs is long past.
What kind of support are you getting from the U.S. and the government here and governments in other places? High-level support are you getting?
Well, the U.S. government has already put out statements condemning what the killing of Mahsa Amini, but also the killing of the protesters. They have mentioned that they are supporting efforts to provide internet access to the protesters and the people on the ground. U.S. Congress has gotten involved and putting out statements in support of the uprising. But we need to go further than that. I think we need to realize that it's not something that temporarily that you would put out a statement and then, be just to be on the right side. You need to throw your weight of the international community behind the people in Iran. And if there is the willing to do that, they know what to do. They know what it takes. Look at the case of South Africa, how the whole world lined up against the apartheid. Look at the case of the, in Poland, the solidarity movement in Poland, how the whole world galvanized behind them, and eventually, that rule will collapse. The same thing needs to be lined up right now regarding the people of Iran. The actual work is done by the people of Iran. They are the ones who are engaged in overthrowing it. There is an organized resistance movement in Iran. You mentioned, JJ, about the our movement, what we have done over the years, exposing all the major nuclear sites of Iran, exposing the entire terror operation of the regime, paying a very high price. Tens of thousands of the members of this movement have been executed by the Iranian regime. It has a very solid network of activities on the ground in Iran. So there's no worries on the ground. What really needs to be done is to line up pressure against the regime. You don't want to give them more money. You don't want to, relieve them from any kind of limitations or sanctions. Instead, you want to build up pressure on the regime, make them pay the price for every single person they kill, pay the price for every single terror operation they conduct. And then, you will see the difference.
Alireza Jafarzadeh, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. We appreciate the opportunity to learn more about this, unfortunately, this tragic situation involving Mahsa Amini. But hopefully her parents and her family will find some solace in the support for her. And hopefully justice will be done. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, I want to add one more point, JJ. It's not a coincidence that, it's a woman death that triggers what we have seen in the streets of Iran all over the country, because this regime is vehemently misogynist. The core of repression of this regime against the women. And it's not a coincidence that in the ranks of the opposition itself is led by women. You know, our leader is a woman, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, and she has introduced a platform, a 10-point plan for the future of Iran based on gender equality, based on, you know, ballot box as the only criteria for legitimacy, separation of church and state, freedom of expression, freedom of political parties, and a non-nuclear Iran. So that's why I think, you know, what you see now really corroborates with the realities on the ground, and hopefully the mullahs would be swept away from the power from the by the forces that they never counted anything on them. You know, women are not even considered second class citizens by the regime, and now they're being confronted, you know, by the population led by women.
Alireza Jafarzadeh, again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, JJ. Appreciate that.